The Human Tech Podcast, a podcast about the intersection between humans and technology. My name is Guthrie. I am here with Susan. Hello.
Hello. Hey, Guthrie.
Yes.
I'm going to catch you unawares again. I could have warned you.
Oh, great.
Since we should, before we get into our topic for today, we should talk about the workshops, upcoming workshops.
Yeah.
And then
let's talk about what's
last
going
time
on.
I did this to you, I didn't give you any warning, so you didn't have the dates and stuff ready.
Yes, you also did that again, but I. Okay,
so I'll start talking while you look it up.
Let's talk about some stuff that's coming up here.
Okay.
So we have 2 workshops in the Columbus area. The first is on I believe the 30th of May.
No.
Sorry, the 16th of May.
Yes.
And the other one is going to be June 4th. And those are going to be in the Columbus area. So you can go, you can find those on Eventbrite.
And the first one is on behavioral design. And the second one is on UX leadership, right?
Yeah. Let's talk about some other things that'll be going on. Theoretically, I will be giving a workshop at UXPA, national conference here in the States.
In Florida at the end of June.
In the end of June. So, and I will be then, of course, attending the rest of the conference.
So that is on UX management, right?
Yep, UX management.
The pre-conference workshop is on UX management.
Yeah, so if anyone's going to UXPA, and
look for Guthrie.
You spy me. Of course, it's a podcast. No one knows what I look like, but theoretically, if you hear,
unless they're watching the video,
hear my sultry voice, you could be like,
that happened to me once. Did I tell you that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, I think I was there.
No, you weren't there.
I wasn't there. Okay.
No, I was.
This happened before.
I was in a meeting in a lobby of an office building in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm sitting there talking to someone, and I see these people out of the corner of my eye that keep like peeking around the corner in a really weird way, stalky way. And finally, we just both me and the person I was talking to just turned our heads and looked at these people, and they came out of hiding. And one of them said, "I recognize your voice. I recognize your voice. Are you Susan Weincheck?" I felt like just such a celebrity, but he didn't know what I look like. He had just been listening to the podcast. So
for those of you who've never seen a picture of her, you're about 6'1".
I am. I have long flowing blonde hair, and really I should have been a supermodel. Like rail thin and no, okay. I'm 5 feet tall. I think I'm shrinking. And
all right. So yeah, UXPA, come see me. We're doing a workshop before the conference.
Off topic. Yeah.
And then the topic that we're going to talk about today is
very nerdy.
Well, that's okay. We've been doing some high level stuff, so we can do some.
This is very practical.
Yeah. We like to kind of vacillate between deep in the weeds and not. And so we have creating user research plans versus creating user research protocols. And I guess that's niche, but whatever. That's what we're going to talk about. This is we're working on just sort of like we can talk about UX management. So my workshop at UXPA is UX management. We are mostly me, but we are working on a book about.
We're writing another book.
We are currently at right over 31,000 words. So it's
he keeps a word count. I've never kept a word count when I'm writing.
I know where I need to get.
That's very funny.
So I think we're going to be right on track.
Okay.
So we're about halfway done. Anyone who knows that 50,000, 60,000 words, that's a good sized.
I don't even know how many words are in my books.
So I mean that's coming along, and hopefully the goal is to have that done by UXPA.
By the conference. If that happens, don't hold me to it. That's ambitious.
It is ambitious, but whatever. So that's sort of the big the big picture on that. The other thing is that UXPA now has a certification.
Oh yeah.
So I want to make sure I get the words.
I bet
the
that's
wording
going to be
right.
very controversial.
And of course, well, everything UXPA does is
certifications are always controversial. Started by the some UXPA groups in Europe, actually.
Yeah. So, anyways, they're starting up a well, how can I? Why can I not find it?
That doesn't sound good.
Yeah, it's not a great start to this freewheeling podcast. Oh my god, I have it here. I have it. So the official name, because I really don't want to get it wrong. The official name is
You can't find it.
Yeah, the International Accreditation Program of UX Professionals.
Oh, well, that is a complicated name.
Knew I wasn't going to get it right. Yeah. So it's not. It's an accreditation program.
It's what?
International Accreditation Program of UX Professionals.
Okay.
Of which I am one of the first to be accredited as UX manager accreditation. So I now it's interesting. I wish that the UXPA and IXDA would figure their stuff out together, so there's not like 7 different organizations, but that's the world we live in. But at least for UXPA, they have this new accreditation, and so we're doing lots of. This is like the year of UX management, sort of. I guess it's turning into a small focus area for the first half of this year. So we got the workshop and the book and the accreditation and so those, as things usually go with us, right? Like if you're writing a book on psychology, that's top of mind. If we're doing management, that's top of mind.
Yeah.
So let's talk. You were helping me because there are certain parts of the book that I can do, and there's certain parts of the book that you know more than me. So I'm happy to admit that. And this was one. We had quite a discussion about because we're putting together sort of a list of important skills for people to have, and one of them was creating. We had on the list creating user research plans, and we also had creating user research protocols. And there was a bit of a semantic discussion about this because you were not sure if the industry actually used these terms
the way
you use those terms. Yeah, and this is again something that's some things are standard, right? Like a heuristic evaluation. Lots of people use that term.
No, that's not 100% standard either. But
okay, how about a user test?
I think amongst people who really know about user tests, I'm going to say that's much more standardized than some of these.
So there's some things that are standardized, but again, because UX is this amalgamation of different orgs and professional stuff, and there's not a central government that is controlling, which is what I was saying. I wish there's there's CHI and there's IXDA and there's UXPA and the project manager association people. They're doing stuff, and so I do wish, which is different than a lot of stuff in, for example, the coding world. Though it has its exceptions, but there are other professional organizations where it's like there's the professional organization for X, and there's just sort of like a central body that sort of not necessarily governs, but at least sets the standard that everyone can follow. And I'm not sure UX really has that.
We don't even have that, yeah.
And honestly, the closest that maybe comes to it is whatever Nielsen Norman decides to put on their website.
You consider them the standard, but
I know that's, and we're like quibbling and stuff, but
yeah. Although they didn't have anything about what's the difference between a UX plan and a UX protocol, not that we could find.
Yeah.
So they weren't helpful in that anyway.
Don't know if you're just looking for like base level UX.
I just wanted to
what's
find
an X, what's a Y. I feel like the Nielsen Norman stuff that they have at their website is pretty great. And generally, like, because are they the biggest player in the UX space?
Now,
Yeah. So, as the biggest player, they sort of
of course,
get to,
one of our competitors, but we won't talk about that.
oh, it's okay. They get to sort of set the standard in some capacity.
But they
So,
didn't address this issue
but they didn't address this
as we
issue.
could find, as
So
far as we could find.
we are now sort of in the deep niche.
Well,
weeds
yeah,
of things.
because the thing is, when we got to this section of the book that we were working on, I had very definite ideas about what's a UX research plan versus what's a UX research protocol. And then as I was,
But there's a sort of a semantic difference. It's hard because you're explaining very abstract concepts, and
right,
you just have to pick a word.
Hence, and this is just the terms I've used for decades. And then, but as I was writing about it, I went, wait a minute. This is probably one of those things where this is what I call it, but I'm not sure the rest of the world makes that distinction. So we went looking to see.
So let's start with your definitions. Okay.
So first of all,
we know what user research is. We'll just sort of assume people know what user research is.
So first I want to say that we did go looking to see if my definitions were standard. And the answer I came up with is not exactly, close enough, not in opposition to what I think is out there. So I felt okay with continuing. All right. So what do you want me to do first?
Which may not be true for all of the stuff. At a certain point, you do just have to stick to your guns.
Have to pick a name and go for it.
Yeah. You just got to be like, all right, we're calling this
this.
Whatever we want to call it. And, if you have
a
different
name. And I do that
name,
a lot.
But I do think that happens in UX all the time, and the naming and stuff gets very confusing. What was that? What was that thing that you said you were talking about that I somehow had not heard of? That wasn't a user test.
Oh, I said, well, some people think that if they do user acceptance testing, they've done a user test, and you were like, what?
Yeah. So like
I said a user acceptance test, and you were like,
I wasn't familiar with that particular term.
What is it? Right.
I for those of you who may or may not know, before I came into the UX world, I did a bunch of stuff. One of the things I did was I did some work for risk mitigation, risk management work. So some of the ISO standards and that kind of stuff. And so we had when you come out of that world, which is more of like a procurement risk world, the way you talk about terms, you talk about quality assurance, and you talk about risk mitigation management, it has a different terminology than some of the
user acceptance testing comes from actually the programming development world.
Comes from that sort of QA testing in the programming development
and it is not the same as a user test,
which I have less experience
and I had to explain this recently yet again to someone when I said,
so you have this thing, right? So first explain what a user test is in the UX world.
Oh, are we going down that road? We're not going down the user.
Just so that people
you want to finish this up.
Terms.
Okay, a user test. Well, we were writing this in the book. I should go read what we wrote. But I'll just say a user test is a form of evaluation in which you put an actual representative user in front of your product or using your service. Ask them to do specific tasks in as realistic a situation as possible. And then you observe what happens and observe what the user experience issues might be.
This was quite the debate that we had, because you were of the impression that if you do a user test and you don't use an actual user, it's
like
just
if
as
you
bad.
Use a friend or a colleague or another.
It's just as bad as if you
don't
do the test at all.
And you were like, no, it's not. And I was like,
I disagreed, and you were very adamant about that.
So we were having fun working on this book together. Let's just say that.
But yeah, no. So that was a fun disagreement. But I mean, I think I think you are probably correct, but that's a hot take.
Just get rid of the word probably. Just get rid of
that's
take
that's a
that
bit
word
of
out.
like a
I'm a purist.
yeah, that's very very purist of you. Okay, so that's a user test.
Yeah.
So what is this other thing that you're describing?
User acceptance testing.
User acceptance
And it
testing.
sounds very similar,
It
doesn't
has
it?
user and
And
testing
testing in it.
in
And
the
and
name.
acceptance sounds like a good idea.
Acceptance.
So what's
That's
the problem?
the user is accepted the
No.
thing you made in your
User
test,
acceptance testing,
which
probably
we don't. Well, we're
we
not
don't do
deep in the
that.
programming weeds,
No.
so
Is
don't quote us.
supposedly what when you go online and read about it, what you're going to read is that this is a step in the development process in which the developer goes through the product and makes sure that all the important functions of that product work. So it's really a QA test of functionality. So it does focus on the user interface part, not the underlying programming code. But a developer will go through. I mean, let's say that they're creating, an e-commerce checkout. They will go through and make sure that indeed you can search for a product and you can put the product in the cart and you can put 3
Put in the
products in the
state and the
cart
zip
and
code,
it will add it the total amount up correctly. The credit
sales
card thing
tax.
will come. It'll process the credit card. And that's a user acceptance test. And that's great. I hope somebody's checking out that it does what you said you were going to do. But that is not the same as putting that e-commerce process in front of actual user and then watch them go, I don't understand here. And why did it add, what is that app fee for? I don't know what that fee is. Do I want that fee? Is that optional? All the things that users will be thinking and doing when they're using it, it's not the same thing. And I was
So
in a meeting recently where I was looking at a product that the client had created that had a lot of user experience issues. And I said, "What is your plan for doing user testing?" And he's like, "What? User testing? You mean user acceptance testing? Yeah, we'll do that, right before we release. We'll go through." And I'm like, "No." And he's like, "What? I don't know. Is there's another kind of testing we should be doing?" I mean, he was like, had no clue.
yeah, he's a developer and sure, never heard of it.
No, I don't think he was. I think he was like a product owner
Whatever.
at a high level. Okay.
Doesn't really matter.
Doesn't
The
matter.
point is that there are different kind of things that you have to describe, and sometimes the words all mix together. And so to just focus on a standard can be difficult.
Yeah.
Sometimes. So
all right, back to user research plans and user research protocols.
Well, it's good, right? So we sort of now we have like what user research is. So what is a user research plan and what is a user research protocol?
Yeah, and we're using the term user research broadly, so we don't mean just user testing. We mean any kind of user research. It could be interviews, it could be a user test, it could be a diary study, it could be a card sort, it could be anything, right?
Yeah.
All right, a user, which one you want to do first? The plan? Let's do the plan.
Let's do the plan.
Okay. A user research plan is should be a document. It could be, a presentation, I suppose, typically done as a document. It's brief, 1 page, maybe 2 at most, that summarizes the research you are going to do. And so it would have things in it like, what are the goals and objectives of the research? What is it we're trying to find out in this research? Who are we trying to, who are going to be the participants in the research? Who is it we're going to interview or do recruit for user testing? Which personas or what kind of people? Like, okay, we better get, new customers and existing customers. So you briefly describe what users are going to participate. It's going to include the methodology. We're going to do a user test. We're going to do a card sort. We're going to do interviews. So it describes a little bit, again, it's all brief, but a little bit about the methodology you're going to use. It should include the research, the questions you're trying to answer, or the hypotheses that you're trying to test or validate. So if we know what we want to find out is, we believe that we have an information architecture that will fit the way the users think. That our hypothesis is that users will be able to find what they need through the proposed information architecture. That's a hypothesis, and that's one thing we want to test. It can be that section can be broad. It can also be very specific. Do people know what the term services means when they see it on the menu, right? So you have your list of what it is you're trying to learn, and then you have something about the timeline. We're going to be doing these interviews in the month of March and April, and we want to wrap up in middle of May or something. So it's this brief summary of the research that you're going to do. And it's really useful to have because you've probably been thinking about all this stuff, and maybe you and your stakeholder, or you and your client, or you and your team have been talking about it. But did you write it all down in one place and everybody's in agreement? That's what we're doing. Did you run it by any important stakeholders you have? The thing that's interesting, Guthrie, about user research especially is that you say you're going to do this research or run this user test or whatever is the research you're going to do, or do these interviews. And everyone around you, all your stakeholders and everyone goes, yeah, that's good. That sounds good. Yeah. And then you go and do it. And then they don't like the answers you came up with. So then you're like, well, why did you ask them that? Or why did you have them do that during the user test? What you should have done is this and this and this. And part of it is because they don't like the answers. So what you want to do to be able to just get over that objection quickly, you talked to the wrong people, or, you didn't ask the right questions. You want to, have this plan and get everyone to agree that this is a good plan and that it will be useful to have answers to these questions so that when you get the answer, they can't say, well, I don't know why you asked that. So that's a user research plan.
And what you don't want is to have you don't want to have the realization after you've done all the research that actually they just wanted you to rubber stamp what they had already done.
That's right. Or actually the most important question to find out was this, and we didn't ask that because we didn't know that was the most important question. Yeah.
Oh wait, you did the research on that? No, we're actually going to next year. It's been decided we're going to revamp that entire system. So this is actually relevant because we're actually going to change platforms.
I know. So, and then the other reason it's really helpful to do this is that it helps limit the scope. Because if you've ever sat down with stakeholders and said, okay, and Guthrie, we know you've been on some of these conversations, so what is this research about? It's like, okay, it's like everything in the world. All right. We're not going to get everything in the world answered in the next month.
They kind of turn into their elevator pitch for why they should do the project.
Yeah.
Which is like not what I don't care that you... This is going to bring synergy to the whatever.
Right. We need to let's focus. What are the questions we want answers to?
What do you want to know? Right?
Yeah. So it's really useful for that too, making everyone focus on and you have to research. You have to narrow research down. Typically, you always want to do much more research than you can possibly fit into the first study. So. You've got to force your stakeholders and clients to focus, and the research plan will help do that. All right, so that's a research plan. And if you're doing research, you should have a research plan. And even if you didn't have anyone to show it to, which I doubt is true, you should still have a research plan just for yourself. Now, you want to switch and talk about protocol, research protocol?
Sure.
So, some people, that thing I just called a plan, there are some people who call that a protocol. And I don't. And I do know, I think that happens. At least ChatGPT calls that, what I just described, a protocol. But to me, a protocol is different. A protocol is your script. A protocol, so in the plan I described, in general what I'm doing and my methodology and who we're doing it on. But I don't have any details in that plan about, okay, so the first question I'm going to ask is this, and then we're going to go to this question, and then I'm going to show them this prototype, and then I'm going to get their feedback, right? That's not in the plan. The plan is just this kind of summary. That's in the protocol. So the protocol tells you exactly what you're going to be doing during whatever the sessions are that you're putting together to have users do, whether it is an interview, whether it is a user test, or whatever the methodology is. It has all the details in there. So let's just take an example that you're going to do an in-person moderated user test. So you're going to bring users in, you're going to have them use the product and do certain tasks. So, okay, it's time for the first session. What are you doing? So it's the script. So it would include in there the opening stuff that, as the moderator, you should be saying. And then it's going to have your first task that it's going to give the scenario and the first task that you want them to do. And then it's going to give the next task. And it's just everything mapped out. So whoever's moderating the session has everything in front of them that they're supposed to do. And it might include things like a link to the, by the way, this protocol document, it's the people you're interviewing or testing don't see it. It's just for you as the moderator or as the team. It might have links to, a spreadsheet where we're collecting the data, links to the prototype that you're going to show or whatever. It might have in there, one of the things I always recommend people do, especially, in interviews or user tests, is like time marking points where, a little thing that says, okay, if when you reach this question number 7, check the time. If you are more than halfway through your time, skip questions 7 and 8, go on to question 9, because you want to make sure you don't run out of time. And so you might need to do that. So it's just everything you need in your script to follow. It's kind of like the director's version of the script or the conductor's version of the symphony. Everything
Anyone
on there
who's done, user tests will know this well.
Yeah, and that's
should.
That's a protocol, and it's useful for you so that you're not flailing around. But it's also important for like your note taker, so they can follow along. It's important if you have more than one person doing the interviews, right? We need to interview 20 people, and we got to speed it up, so we have 2 people doing interviews. Then you want, it's really important to make sure that everybody's doing the same thing, following the same steps and asking the same questions. So that's what a user research protocol is. And I think it's really important to have both a plan and a protocol when you're doing user research. And I'm kind of confused when I'm mentoring someone and I ask to see their plan and their protocol, and they're like, well, here's a few questions I thought I would ask. It's like, okay, that's not good enough.
I mean, yeah. So it's, do you feel like in the user research world these things are standardized? Like, is almost everyone like, would they call it this? Are they using that? Is
I
this an
think
invention that you created?
no, I don't think so. I might have created. I didn't invent it. Okay, I might when I started doing user research, which let's be real, was a really long time ago, before very many people were doing this kind of research. Um, I'm sure I created a plan and a protocol for myself. That doesn't mean I invented it. I'm pretty sure other people doing research around that same time were probably creating the same kind of things. Um, I think anyone who's done a lot of research and is very organized about it ha- either learned to use a plan or a protocol or created their own. Because if you're doing this a lot, you're going to want it. But having said that, there are a lot of people doing user research who are not specialists at it, right? I mean, there's a lot of UX designers that all of a sudden need to do some research. There's a lot of programmers and developers that decide to. I've heard about this thing called a user test, not user acceptance testing, but real user testing, and I'm going to go do it, right? So I think there's a lot of people who don't do research as a full-time job who may not. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people in that situation that are not doing a plan and are not doing a protocol and should be. Um, you know,
Yeah,
because I think
it should be.
every research needs a plan and a protocol, just period.
So, hopefully these terms can get standardized. I wish there was a source of universal truth. We have talked about,
Oh my God,
making one,
that's
but do you know the old XK CD
I don't know what you're talking about.
standards? Okay, so there's a great sort of modern uh, uh, I don't know, comic? Is that what it is? Anyways, writes it in sort of like the traditional, three frame or sort
You
of
mean a graphic novel kind of thing?
no, but it's like a comic you'd see in a newspaper, right? It's only just like the one, like Garfield, right? It's like
Yeah,
1, 2, 3,
yeah.
oftentimes. And so there's a famous one, number 927, and it says the first frame says situation. There are 14 competing standards, and then it's got two people talking. 14? Ridiculous. We need to develop one universal standard that covers everyone's use case. And the other person says, yeah, situation. There are 15 competing standards, right? And so, like, and that's there, that, like, uh, that it's funny, but I do feel like it's also true. Like, we are as guilty of it as anyone, right? We see that there's not that there's a lack of standardization in the UX field, and it drives us crazy because it's just like, oh, just like let's just, I don't even care. Can we just agree so we don't have to have these cosmic semantic discussions about 1,000 things constantly all the
What
time?
is a scenario? What is a user scenario?
And
What is a
so we're
use
like,
case
let's fix
scenario?
it, and then we're like, here's our way to, we solved universally, right? And well, now there's just more fracturing because we're introducing new stuff. And I think the only way that it'll ever get fixed is if IXDA and UXPA merge,
I don't know that that would fix it anyway, Guthrie.
and
I
then
don't
they
know that
have
it'll ever get
a
fixed.
standard, like as like a standard repository. Can I actually do a slight tangent complaining about IXDA?
Guthrie, you really want to do that? What if
I
they're
do.
what? Oh my
I
God.
do. I like IXDA, and
You've been getting involved locally, right? And going to
yes,
meetings and stuff.
IXDA Columbus.
Hmm.
Yeah. That's the other thing that drives me crazy. I mean, we work with a lot of local chapters, and it's
Wait a minute.
such like,
I'm usually the complainer here. You're going to be the
what
complainer?
this is. Like
All right, go
some
ahead.
cities have an IXDA chapter and not a UXPA chapter.
Okay.
And some cities have a UXPA chapter and not an IXDA chapter.
Right.
And some cities have
Don't
both,
have anything.
yes, or none at all.
And some have Chi.
And some have Chi. And then there's other, various industry
Right.
stuff.
And there
So
used to be a lot more local chapters. They disappeared.
right.
During
Well,
the
yeah, the pandemic
pandemic.
killed a lot of local chapters. But as it were. So like I know someone who was living in a city and they were involved in their local UXPA chapter, okay? And so they were UXPA members and they had all these connections in UXPA and they went to the conference and they knew people in UXPA and all UXPA. And then they moved. And so the city they moved to didn't have a UXPA chapter. They had an IXDA chapter, which functioned at a local level practically identical, except it was IXDA instead of UXPA. So they had to relearn all the stuff, get different memberships, blah, 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 go all the way around and like totally they had, there's like, channels of communication and all this stuff. And they basically have to like, so now they have two things. They're still part of UXPA because they have years of being with UXPA, but now they're also part of IXDA because their local chapter doesn't exist. And it's just okay, but that's not actually what I was complaining about.
What are you complaining about?
IXDA, while great, it has a really big on the international appeal. They've always been cross continent, right? They've always had sort of a European.
Yeah, and UXPA has been slower at that, a lot slower.
Yeah, UXPA definitely has an international
now
wing, but they have a tradition and history of
US based.
of at least the US arm of it has
been stronger.
Strong for a long time. And so, IXDA has always had sort of a foot in both sides of the fence, where they've had sort of a European contingent and a US contingent. And so they've been doing annual conferences on this global level where it's like, it's in Amsterdam, it's in Australia, it's in Japan, it's in Texas, it's in Canada, it's in Germany. It's just like all over the place.
You mentioned Texas as though it was its own country. I just thought I would throw that in.
Six Flags.
Because right? you put Texas in amongst countries.
So, I did live in Texas briefly.
Texas is not its own country. I just thought I'd throw that in. All right. Anyway, yes. So
okay, I'll finish this up and then I'll take a short detour for maybe our international audience who's heard funny things about Texas but maybe doesn't know about the Six Flags over Texas. So right. Okay, so they need an annual, or do it every other year. They need an annual conference in North America, and they need an annual conference or every other year in Europe, because to expect professionals to jet all over the world just to go to the conference every year is too much. One thing UXPA has always done well is every year there's a conference. If you're in the United States, it's in a different place every year, whatever. But if you want to go to the annual conference and see your colleagues and have the experience and be part of
this is not true.
This is not true?
No, it was in the US every year, once a year for a long time.
Yeah.
And then they started doing every other year instead of the US. Instead, it was in Europe.
Well, I said you could do every other year. That's fine.
Okay.
Right, but like regular, right? There's a regular cadence.
There's a regular cadence. There's always a conference. It's always in summer. It's going to be US sometimes and Europe sometimes.
But then you can maybe plan for it, Yes. And maybe I'm wrong with IXDA, but my understanding is that there has not been a regular cadence. Like every June, it's the IXDA conference, and I can fly to it domestically. And so I can start going every single year.
Yeah.
And so that's all. I'm rooting for them, and I want to go to their annual conference in the US. Like I'm not going to go to Australia.
I know, which was what they set up.
Which is to go to a conference. So
and saying and continuing a bit with this detour, you know, UXPA, again, all the associations, I think they've all been going through transition with the pandemic and so on. But UXPA, which I believe started in like 1997, it started very small, and then it got big, and then it got small, a little bit small again during recessions and stuff. But there really is something, and anybody listening who has been to, gone to a conference like this and gone year after year after year,
Like you did for many years.
like I did for many years. If it's a relatively small conference, when I first started going to UXPA, it was probably about 200, 250 people. Then it grew to about 450. Then it grew to like 650. And then it went back down again to maybe like 300 or 400. But even if, as long as it's, not higher than the 650, and certainly when it was at the 300, 400 level.
And the caveat being the pandemic messed everything up and everything's weird, and it'll take a couple years to settle out. So I totally understand all that.
Yeah. But it becomes a really important thing to go to every year. I mean, I used to go to UXPA conference every year, almost every year. And I would see people there that I didn't see any other time except at that conference. And but you build up networks, you make friends, the connections. And you know me, Guthrie, I'm an introverted person. I'm not an extrovert. But the connections that I would make at a conference like that were really invaluable, and did amazing things for my career. Amazing things for my career.
Professional organizations are really important.
They're so important. I went to a UXPA conference in Portland, Oregon, and they had, a reception the night before the conference started. And I always went to that because that's where everybody would be. And I just started talking to a person who was standing there eating, snacks. And it turned out that she was from Wisconsin, where I live. And in fact, she lived within 40 minutes of my house. And she was a professor at University of Wisconsin. And she said to me, "You should really teach. You could be an adjunct. You don't have to teach full time. You should come teach at our department where we teach human-computer interaction at the undergraduate level." And I was like, "You do?" And so we arranged when we both got back home, we would get together. And that's how I ended up being an adjunct for like years and years, because of a person I met in Portland, Oregon at the conference. So, the connections are just, they're really important. And I would encourage everyone, if you have a local organization near you, start going to local events. And if they have a national conference, see if you can go. I know it's not cheap. I know it's not easy. But I think if you pick, and I think it is really good to pick one conference and you go to it again and again and again, and you get those relationships going.
And there's so the other thing that happens is, there's UX is growing so much. You can start to support regional stuff.
Well, there are regional conferences.
Well, they're trying. So
there used to be, like Boston had a regional conference and UXPA conference, and DC had a regional, but they may have fallen apart.
Again, yeah, there used to be Midwest UX, which was a Midwest UX conference, and that fell apart. So I know the pandemic made things weird, but now that we're kind of coming out of the ashes of that,
let's bring it back.
Well, so I live in the Columbus area, right?
Yeah.
And when I kind of first moved here about a year ago, there really wasn't a UX professional organization there. IXDA was around, but they were, they had a handful of people getting together once a month for breakfast, which is good that it managed.
Better than nothing,
right? A lot of chapters totally fell apart. And so they had that infrastructure there. And now, we're trying to grow it, and we're trying to, and I think it is growing. Because Columbus is a city of 1 million people, right? Like the idea that you'd have a city of 1 million people without a with
And with
huge,
lots of
large corporate
corporate.
stuff with designers and all, huge headquarters of major, healthcare and all kinds of stuff. Like the fact that a city of 1 million people wouldn't have a local chapter of a UXPay or of just a UX professional organization is just frustrates me. That's all.
That should have been your criteria when you picked a city to go move to, Guthrie. Like it was for me.
Well, I was just like,
Edgar,
okay,
Wisconsin.
No, what's fine. If I was just like, if we're not going to do it, then I'll just start a chapter. It's not all that hard to start a chapter, but the chapter is already there and I'm participating and it's going well and so it'll all be fine. But yeah, no. So I just it's always hard, it's like the UXPA, IXDA, it's sort of like being a child of divorced parents, like it's like I love you both. Like, can't you just like
can't you just get along?
Like I don't want separate Christmases. I just want to go to the one annual, conference for all the UXPA people.
Oh my God.
But that's not the world we live in. We live in a fractured world. So that's, I guess in some ways I'm idealist. All right. I will close out with the Six Flags over Texas.
Okay.
Have you ever heard, for those who are around the world and may not, or those in the United States who may not know some of this classic Texas lore, Texas is a lot of fun. Have you ever heard of the theme park Six Flags?
I have heard of the theme park.
Named after the Six Flags over Texas. Six Flags over Texas is part of the Texas lore insofar as Texas has had 6 different flags that it has flown over it. That is owned by sort of 6 different governmental things.
I did not know this story.
Yeah, it's
I
fun.
just thought Six Flags over Texas just meant that they to fly Six Flags
there were
at the theme park.
6 flags that have flown over the state of
Texas.
Texas.
What are they?
The first one was 1519. That is a long time ago.
It's a long time ago. What was the flag?
Texas flew under the Spanish flag.
Okay. Oh, okay. So Spanish.
So, El Paso, which was established in 1681, flew the red and yellow striped flag after 1785 with the Lion of Leon and the Castle of Castile on the shield, and so Spain.
That's one.
For like 200 years, so just like
okay, stuff like a long time.
Then there was Texas under France.
Really?
In 1685, France planted its flag in eastern Texas near the Gulf Coast, although also claimed by Spain. Most of Texas didn't have any Spanish presence at that time. And so the French, who owned states like Louisiana right next door,
before it was Louisiana,
they had 5 years where France claimed Texas in 1685.
Okay, so that's 2.
And so the French, the fleur de lis was on ships and ports in Texas.
Okay.
Then in 1821, after that France thing went back to Spain and was Spanish for another 200 years because, just history stuff. So then there was Texas under Mexico for 15 years. After Mexico became independent, basically Texas, there was a, because it had seceded from Spain. Mexico seceded from Spain.
Okay.
Texas was part of Spain, but it was part of the larger sort of, I guess you could call it Mexican territory. So they flew the Mexican flag.
Okay.
Then there was, of course, the Texas, I don't know if you want to call it the Revolution.
Right.
And the Texas Rangers, all that kind of stuff. And Texas became its own country for 11 years.
I think I know where the rest is headed.
The Republic of Texas. So that's
it was its own country. 4. 5.
Then Texas joins the Union.
Right.
Becomes a state in 1845.
Okay.
Okay, so that's 5. And then
And
in 1861, it joins the Confederacy, and it flies the
oh, like
Confederate
did it really?
flag.
Wow.
Yes, and then of course
So
it
the
was
theme
reunited.
park, Six Flags Over Texas, does it have all 6 flags?
That's a great question. It's
They're not flying a Confederate flag.
no, no. I'm looking at their at the logo. There are the logo has 6 flags. They're just like colored. There's like a yellow flag and an
Okay,
orange
okay,
flag
okay.
and a green flag. And stuff.
That is a great story, Guthrie. I didn't know that story.
The original logo has
Did.
the did. Now, the one thing I will say is that it's not the Confederate flag in what you're thinking of.
Yeah.
It's the Texas in the Confederacy, which
Okay.
is it's not the stars and bars that we
Right, of
often
the
see.
Confederate flag.
It looks like it looks like the Texan flag of
Yeah.
old. So it's 3 stripes, red, white, red, and then sort of in the American corner, there's the blue thing with a couple
I'm gonna go
stars.
look at it. Well,
Yeah,
okay.
it was not the stars and bars.
All right.
That
More than we needed to know, but an interesting story.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, Guthrie, if people want to reach us and talk about Texas flags or anything else, where should they reach us?
Texas Natural History.
No, come on.
No, you can email info@theteamw.com. So that's
All
the way
right.
to do it. Yeehaw.
Thank you, Guthrie.
I'll talk to you later.
Talk to you later. Bye.